Last Tuesday, I stopped by a small place near my office and ordered a simple meal. Nothing fancy, no extras, no drink, just a 12 lunch after a long day of work. When I tapped my card, the screen flipped toward me. 18, 22, 25. Then a service fee I hadn't noticed on the menu. Then tax. By the time the receipt printed, that 12 meal had quietly turned into almost 18. I didn't choose to upgrade anything. I didn't say yes to more food, I just said yes to getting out of there without feeling awkward. So here's the question I couldn't shake on the walk back to my desk. When did prices stop being prices and start becoming suggestions? My name is John, and I make videos about money not from the perspective of someone who figured it all out, but from the perspective of someone who has stood in line after work, stared at a payment screen, and wondered how a simple purchase got so complicated. This channel exists for people who work, pay bills, feel tired, and still somehow feel like their money disappears faster than it should. Not because they're reckless, not because they're bad with money, but because modern life has been redesigned in ways that quietly extract more from you without ever announcing it. Today's video is about something a lot of people feel but struggle to explain: tipflation. That moment when a price looks reasonable until it isn't. When a 12 meal becomes 18. When a coffee turns into a moral test. When you're no longer deciding how much something costs, but how much discomfort you're willing to tolerate in public. Tipping used to be simple. It was optional. It was personal. It was a thank you for good service. Now it shows up everywhere. Self-checkout kiosks, food trucks, merch booths, airport kiosks, often before anyone has even done anything for you. And this video's not about shaming workers. It's not about telling you to stop tipping. And it's definitely not about saying just cook at home or stop eating out, as if people don't already know that. This is about understanding how the system changed. Because prices didn't just go up, they fractured. Instead of one honest number, we now get layers. Menu price, service fee, platform fee, tax, suggested tip. Each one feels small. Each one feels defensible. And by the time they add up, the decision is already over. In this video, I want to walk through three things. First, how modern pricing turned into a series of suggestions instead of a clear cost, and why businesses prefer it that way. Second, the psychology behind tip screens and service fees and why they make normal, reasonable people feel pressured into paying more than they planned. And finally, what you can actually do about it, not in a perfect, moral, spreadsheet-approved way, but in a human way that respects workers without letting guilt become your monthly subscription. Because if money stress feels heavier than it used to, there's a reason, and it's not just inflation. Let's slow this down and look at what actually happened to that 12 meal. Because the important thing here isn't the food, it's the structure of the bill. For most of modern history, prices were simple. You saw a number, you decided yes or no. That was it. But today, the price you see is just the opening move. The real cost is revealed in stages, like a game you didn't agree to play. Layer 1 is the menu price. This is the number your brain anchors to. $12. Reasonable, familiar, comparable. You've already decided this is acceptable before you even reach the counter. Layer 2 shows up later. The service fee. Sometimes it's called a wellness fee, sometimes a staff support fee. Sometimes it's buried in fine print near the bottom of the menu or hidden behind a tiny icon on an app. It's usually somewhere between 3 and 20. And here's the key detail. It doesn't feel like a price increase because it's framed as a cause, as something virtuous, as something you're supposed to support. By the time you notice it, you've already ordered. Walking away now feels petty, so you accept it quietly. Then comes layer 3, the tip screen. This is where the tone changes. The screen turns toward you, the line forms behind you, and suddenly you're not choosing a percentage, you're choosing what kind of person you want to be in public. The options aren't neutral. 18, 22, 25. There's no normal button anymore. There's no thanks button. There's just a sliding scale of generosity, with the lowest option subtly labeled in a way that makes you feel like you're breaking a social rule. And here's something most people miss. That tip is often calculated after the service fee, so you're tipping on a fee that may or may not even go to the worker. At this point, you're tired, you're hungry, you don't want to ask questions, you don't want to hold up the line, so you do what most reasonable people do. You press something in the middle, not because you decided it was fair, but because it was easiest. Let's do the math. 12 meal. Add a 15 service fee, 1.80. Subtotal, 13.80. Now add tax. Let's say 1.20. Now the tip screen suggests 20 on 15. That's another 3. Your 12 meal is now 18. No upgrades, no dessert, no conscious splurge, just friction, layered perfectly. And the reason this works is simple. Each layer feels small when viewed alone. No single step makes you angry enough to walk away, but together, they quietly rewrite what affordable even means. So the question isn't, why are people bad with money? The real question is, why are prices no longer allowed to be honest? If you've ever wondered why companies don't just raise prices and be honest, the answer isn't complicated. It's not because they're nicer this way. It's because your brain hates price increases but tolerates fees. When a restaurant raises a 12 meal to 18, people notice. They complain, they compare, they stop coming back. Price increases are loud, they're visible, they trigger resistance. But fees are quiet. A service fee doesn't show up in your mental comparison. You don't say, this place costs more than the one across the street because the menu still says 12. That number stays competitive. It stays innocent. The extra money only appears at the end, when the decision is already over. This is where psychology comes in. Your brain treats the menu price as an anchor. Once that anchor is set, everything else feels like an add-on instead of a replacement. And add-ons don't activate the same alarms. Think about airline tickets. You see a cheap flight, then you pay for a seat, then a bag, then boarding priority. Then suddenly, the cheap flight costs the same as the normal one. Restaurants and apps learned the same lesson. If you add 6 to the price up front, people say no. If you add 1.80 here, 2.40 there, and 3 at the end, people sigh and pay. Another reason fees work is timing. Prices are evaluated before commitment. Fees appear after. Once you've ordered, you're mentally done. You've already pictured yourself eating. Backing out now feels like a loss, even though it's not. So you push through. And then there's branding. Raising prices makes a business look expensive. Adding a staff wellness fee makes it look ethical. The cost is the same, the framing isn't. But the most powerful reason fees work has nothing to do with math. It's exhaustion. Modern life already demands constant decisions. What to eat, where to park, which app to use, how to respond to emails. By the time you reach the payment screen, your decision-making muscle is tired. And tired people don't negotiate. They comply. That's why the tip screen doesn't ask you to type a number, it gives you buttons. Large ones, pre-selected ones, designed to end the interaction quickly. This isn't about tricking stupid people. It works because it targets normal people at the end of their day. People who just want dinner. People who don't want to feel judged. People who don't want to start a moral debate over a burrito. And once you understand that, something important clicks. If prices feel higher than ever but your habits haven't changed, it's not because you're losing discipline. It's because pricing stopped being a single number. There's one ingredient in this system that matters more than percentages, fees, or tax. Guilt. Because if this were just about math, you could opt out. You could calculate. You could say no. But Tipflation doesn't run on logic. It runs on social pressure. Think about the moment the screen turns toward you. It's not neutral. It's bright. It's angled so everyone can see, and it asks a question that sounds simple but isn't. How much are you going to tip? Not if, how much? And suddenly, this isn't a financial decision anymore. It's a public one. Someone is waiting. People are behind you. The worker is standing right there. This is why tipping used to happen after the interaction. After service, after gratitude, after you'd already left the social situation. Now it happens inside it, and that changes everything. Because saying no to a price feels normal. Saying no to a person feels awful. That's the pivot. The system quietly reframed tipping from a personal thank you into a moral signal, a way to prove you're generous, or kind, or not that person. And notice how the options are framed. There's no fair, there's no standard, there's just a ladder. 18, 22, 25. Each step up implies more goodness. Each step down implies a lack of it. Even if no one says a word, the message is clear. This is what psychologists call social compliance pressure, the same force that makes people laugh at jokes they don't find funny, or nod in meetings they don't agree with. You're not tipping because you evaluated the service. You're tipping to end the discomfort. And here's the uncomfortable truth most people don't want to talk about. This system doesn't actually protect workers. It makes them dependent on your mood, your energy level, and your willingness to absorb guilt on behalf of their employer. Instead of paying people more upfront, businesses shifted the emotional labor onto you. You now carry the responsibility of making sure someone else's paycheck feels fair. One awkward screen tap at a time. That's a heavy thing to put on strangers, and it creates a quiet resentment loop. Customers feel pressured, workers feel exposed, businesses stay out of the conflict, everyone feels weird, no one feels satisfied. So when people argue about tipping online, whether it's good or bad, generous or cheap, they're missing the point. The real issue isn't tipping, it's that guilt became a revenue stream. And once you see that, it becomes easier to understand why this system spread so fast. Because guilt is renewable, it doesn't show up on receipts, and it scales beautifully. Here's the part that rarely gets talked about. This system doesn't hit everyone equally. The people who pay the most aren't the wealthiest customers. They're not the people carefully budgeting every dollar on a spreadsheet. They're the people who are busy, tired, and mentally overloaded. The people grabbing food between shifts. Parents picking up dinner with a kid crying in the back seat. Workers ordering delivery because they got home too late to cook. People whose day already demanded 100 small decisions before this one. Because Tipflation doesn't punish lack of money, it punishes lack of energy. If you have time, you can read the fine print. If you have mental space, you can ask questions. If you're rested, you can push back. But if you're exhausted, you just want the transaction to end. And that's where the system quietly extracts more. This is why the advice, just say no, misses the point. Saying no takes effort. Saying no takes social confidence. Saying no takes a surplus of emotional bandwidth. And not everyone has that at the end of the day. There's also something else going on here, something more uncomfortable. Tipflation effectively charges people more for being human. If you don't want to feel judged, you pay more. If you don't want to hold up the line, you pay more. If you don't want to look unkind, you pay more. That's not a character flaw. That's a design feature. And over time, those small moments add up. Not in dramatic ways, not in one giant bill that sends you into debt, but in a constant drip that makes your budget feel tighter than it should. You look at your bank account and think, I don't even eat out that much. But the numbers don't match the feeling. That's because you're not paying for food anymore. You're paying for friction reduction, for convenience, for speed, for social peace. And here's the final twist. The people who feel this the most are often the same people who already carry the most financial stress. The ones who can least afford unpredictability. The ones who rely on small margins to get through the month. So when someone says it's just a few extra dollars, they're not wrong. But they're also not seeing the whole picture, because for some people, those dollars aren't optional. They're the price of getting through the day without one more confrontation. And that's why this matters. Not because tipping is evil, not because people are selfish, but because we built a system that charges exhaustion a premium. So what do you actually do with this information? Not in a perfect world, not in a world where everyone is paid fairly and prices are transparent, but in the world we're actually living in. Because the goal here isn't to win some moral argument about tipping. The goal is to protect your energy, your money, and your sense of control without taking it out on the wrong people. Let's start there. 1. Tip intentionally, not automatically. The first shift is simple but powerful. Stop treating the tip screen like a command. Start treating it like a question. Tipping is meant to reflect service, not software defaults, and it's okay to pause for a second and decide what feels right to you, not what the screen suggests. If someone went above and beyond, tip generously. If there was no service, it's okay to tip less or not at all. That doesn't make you cheap, it makes you conscious. The system wants you to react. You're allowed to respond. 2. Learn to read the final number, not the menu price. One of the biggest mindset shifts is this. The real price is the number after all fees and tips, not the number printed on the menu. When you order on an app or stand at a counter, start doing a quick scan of the total before you pay. Not to shame yourself, just to stay oriented. You don't need a spreadsheet, you just need awareness. Once you see how often totals drift, $3,040 above the listed price, your brain recalibrates. You start making choices based on reality, not promises. 3. Ask the one question that actually matters. If there's a service fee, there's a single question worth asking. Does this fee go to the workers? That's it. If the answer is yes, great, you can adjust your tip accordingly. If the answer is unclear, that tells you something too. You're not being rude, you're being informed. Transparency isn't confrontation, it's a boundary. 4. Choose transparency over convenience when you can. This part isn't about never using apps or never eating out. It's about noticing which businesses are clear and which ones rely on friction. Some places build higher wages into their prices and eliminate tipping entirely. Some show all fees up front, some don't. Over time, choosing transparency when it's available quietly shifts demand. You don't have to be perfect, you just have to be selective. 5. Reframe the emotional responsibility. This might be the most important one. You are not responsible for fixing broken pay structures one transaction at a time. It's generous to tip, it's human to care, but it's not your job to carry systemic guilt in every purchase. Once you understand how the system works, you can stop blaming yourself for feeling uncomfortable and start setting limits without shame. That's not selfishness, that's self-respect. And here's the paradox. When you stop tipping out of guilt and start tipping with intention, your generosity becomes more meaningful, not less. Because it's chosen. If you take one thing away from this video, let it be this: you're not imagining it, and you're not bad with money. The reason a simple meal feels more expensive than it used to isn't because you suddenly lost discipline or stopped caring. It's because prices stopped being honest, and the difference is now collected through fees, friction, and guilt. This system didn't appear by accident. It was designed carefully, layer by layer, to make paying more feel easier than saying no. And once you see that something shifts, you stop feeling ashamed for hesitating at the screen. You stop blaming yourself for feeling tired. You stop thinking every uncomfortable purchase is a personal failure. Money isn't just math, it's emotional, it's social, and it's deeply shaped by the systems we move through every day. Understanding those systems doesn't make you cynical. It makes you free. So the next time a $12 price quietly becomes 18, pause. Not to argue, not to feel guilty, just to notice. Awareness is where control comes back. If this video helped you put words to something you felt but couldn't explain, consider sharing it with someone who's been feeling the same pressure. And if you want more videos like this about money, time, and the quiet forces shaping our lives, subscribe to the channel. Because I don't want you to be wealthy just on paper. I want you to be wealthy in your actual life.